What is up, guys? It's Mason once again, and yes, I know I haven't been posting for a while. Like I said in my previous video, I've been working on some other videos that I would like to do, a little bit of teaching videos. Again, like I said, the psychology of chess competition and the psychology of growth and improvement. So I'm still working on those videos, and I'll get done with them hopefully, because I'm still scripting it and still researching more on it. But in the past few weeks, we had the African Youth Chess Championships. I'm sure you've seen it on the Chess Intense channel. You've seen some videos from it. So yeah, I want to cover some of the games from it. And the African Youth Chess Championship is a yearly championship that is done for the kids, basically under 18, under 16, under 14, under 12, under 10. And we had some very nice games, nice performances, and we'll show that. But most of the games we're going to show here are not necessarily that high level, but there is one upset in the list of games we are showing. So let's look at this first game between Ebo Taji and Abhe. I hope I pronounced these names correctly. This is from the under 10 section. So Ebo as white, Abhe as black. We have e4, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, the Italian, bishop to c5, symmetrical position, and then c3. Now c3 is a move I like to play, especially when I play the Ruy Lopez. And one of the aims is to simply push d4 and just gain control of the center. That's the basic idea. Sometimes you want to get this escape square for your bishop. Again, in the Ruy Lopez, sometimes you meet a6 and then b5, and then you slot your bishop in here. There was this game between Karpov and Kasparov where this ended up being a very beautiful game. You can check that out. Knight f6, attacking the pawn, d4. d4, usually you'd play a move like d3 here, holding the pawn, and then later on striking in the center. But white argues that their position is just fine and they can strike in the center. Of course, it comes with tempo. So d4, e takes d4, c takes d4. Now tempo on the bishop. The bishop now goes bishop to b4. So you can see here that white has a very good center. He can call it a big boy center if you will. But arguably, this is also still good for black, if black knows what he or she is doing. Of course, they are both male here. We have knight to c3 blocking, and then knight takes e4. So I analyzed this game with some friends, and apparently this is theory. If black gets too caught up with this threat here of winning the knight and then forking the king and the rook, white gets some very interesting counterplay. So we have castles, knight takes. Of course, knight takes first because you want to take back with the bishop, threatening the rook. And here you have to be very, very careful as black. Even taking this pawn is already even scary. You have to be very careful as white. Here, as black, sorry. Here, white plays the move bishop to a3. Now, bishop to a3 is not that good a move. Of course, there are lines like queen to b3, and the point is, if your opponent captures here, you simply have bishop takes check. After king goes in here, then bishop comes into g5, attacking the queen. And if your opponent decides to take the knight, threatening your queen, you can simply go a3, check, and after the king takes the bishop, you take his queen. And that is simply good for white. Now, bishop to a3 is not so bad for black. I mean, or for white either ways. But still, as black, you should be careful with taking this rook. Though I know when we start learning chess, we are taught that trading a lower valued piece for a higher valued piece is good, but that is dependent on the position. Most chess rules you learn are dependent on the position, and here this is one of those cases where it's dependent on the position. You have no intermezzo move like rook here to check the king because the bishop guards the square. So maybe you should try something else. Try to block maybe this bishop diagonal, and that could even help you. d6 could help. d5, that's actually what the engine suggests. d5. I would play d6 because that just seems simple. But we have bishop takes a1. And this is one of the reasons why I like this game. This is a game by under 10, so I think they're actually 9, and the combination here is just fantastic. I mean, I don't think I would have seen this at the time. Was I even playing chess at 10? I don't know, but I don't think I would have seen this combination. This is so nice. I'm sure you've already seen this. Rook to e1 check, Knight blocks, it doesn't really do anything. Rook takes check, and literally speaking, the only way you survive this is by sacrificing your queen. But black doesn't want to lose his queen, so he goes king to f8, trying to avoid checkmate. But then bishop pair from hell hash. Shout out to Agadmato. Yeah, you just can't allow this. Rook takes check, and after king to e1, the finisher here, queen to e7. Of course, you can block with your queen, but that does nothing. You just take here checkmate, or you can just continue to torture your opponent since you have unlimited number of checks. But in the end, you're still going to win the game. So fabulous game by Abel Taji. Very interesting game. Let's look at the other game. I'll try and make this video a little bit short, so I don't go through too much. I'll not go into too much depth into the analysis. Okay, this is not the game I want us to go through yet. Let's go to the game by Lefayette and George Michael. This is from the under 16. So George is white and Lefayette is black. Again, sorry if I'm mispronouncing the names. And you notice that there's a lot of rating gaps within the player range. Of course, the first game, none of them were rated, but in this game, there's a big rating gap. Yeah, it is very much expected. If you would go to chessresults.com, the Ghana section, and look at the Africa Online Championship standing list, you see that there's a lot of rating discrepancies, and that is literally the case. It's that big of a gap. And so the aim of this channel and the aim of other channels like Chess Intense and the aim of most of these organizations and federations is to bridge that gap, let's put it that way, so that everyone gets rated and everyone is competitive, and then we can push African chess higher. So let's get on with this game. We have e4, c5, the Sicilian one. Once again, the reason why I stopped playing e4, knight to f3, d6, d4, c takes d4. I think this is the open variation. Knight takes d4, knight f6, knight to c3, a6. I know there's, I don't know if it's in this line. I think after knight here, you could actually play your knight to b3. But that's not what happened in this game. I'm just mentioning it. So f3, e5, knight to b3, yeah, bishop to e6. These are all standard moves. Bishop to e3, bishop to e7, queen to d2, knight b to d7, castle queenside. Now castle queenside is a very, very, very committal move. You could still castle kingside here, but castling queenside just opens you up. Now it could still just be fine for white, but the problem here is there's an open file. And if you recall, during our coverage of the online Olympiad, we had a game where this exact same position occurred. White castled queenside, and it ended up being bad for him in the long run. Of course, as at now, it's not so bad. I mean, the positions could just be equal. But I'm guessing that White's idea here is he wants to go for a freak attack on the king side, since it's obvious that black is going to castle on the king side. Black could stay in the center, though that's also not safe because you have f5 breaks, but that seems to be White's plan here, and it's a very dangerous plan. Of course, he's higher rated, so I think he wants a quick finish, but it's a very dangerous plan because you haven't confirmed whether or not your opponent is exactly going to castle. So h5, simply softening up any ideas or attacks here. Now you have to take more time to prepare it because it opens things up, and this also kind of previews the fact that black might not even castle, and that should bring to futility some of these moves. So king to b1, a normal move, get your king out of this diagonal. You never know when to become a problem. So king to b1, queen to c7, g3, like we said, trying to push pressure here, or going to g4 in the long run, or pushing f4 and getting a big boy center with the 2 points and then going from there. We have rook to c8. Again, like we said, the idea is to put pressure here. Other moves that could come in are b5, b4. These are very common ideas that could happen here. We have h3. So I'll give the position here to black because white is being quite slow with his development, and black just seems to be piling up the pressure, and black is actually lower rated here. So white's complacency in the position could actually make black win. Knight to b6. Maybe he should have played b5 before he played knight to b6, because now the knight blocks his pawns, his pawns. So knight to b6, Bishop takes b6, queen takes b6 again. Like I said, now the pawns are blocked in. Imagine if the pawns were moved and then you had this trade. Now the queen is in a very good position to help support the movement of the pawns. That's where the ideology is coming from. Knight to d5, entering, coming into the center. Knight takes d5, e takes d5, bishop to f5, and all these moves are good. Now everything is opening up in black's favor. The queen is in an advantageous square. This a5 a4 is always an idea. Anything is possible here for black. Now what can white do to win this? The king is in the center, and as you can see, the center is becoming a little bit weak. So moves like f4 are on the radar, bringing the bishop out somewhere, maybe playing this move, breaking open the center, and this king becomes very vulnerable. And even if he castles in some way or form in the future, it's not going to be easy to defend the incoming attack. So black should try as much as possible to keep the center closed. He could castle here. I'm still not convinced about that, but his center is weak. So if you can find a way to build up his attack and keep the center locked, he has a greater chance of winning. Okay, so what we have here, we have bishop to d3. Okay, bringing out his pieces. Like we said, most of his pieces were undeveloped. Black was more active. Black's only problem piece here is bishop here. How he's going to advance, open this bishop. You could actually play some alpha zero ideas, not here, but this move, sacrificing the pawn and then gaining some sort of tempo here, but that can't happen now. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, queen back to c7, knight to d2, b5. Yes, so now b5 is coming in. b5 is coming in. But the trade of pieces have made white's position a little bit safer. Now white is not in as much problem as he was in. And rook to c1, defending against this and allowing the queen to move. Of course, the queen was stuck defending this pawn, but now the queen can move since the rook guards it. We have now bishop to f4. Now this is the bishop to g5. This is the mistake by black. Black was doing fine throughout the game. Of course, he made some mistakes with the trading or how he traded the pawns. Of course, the bishop trade he should have done. There could have been other ways to initiate that trade, but this move, bishop to f4, a seemingly meaningful move, trying to hold down these pieces, maybe planning something like this or something, like just pinning the knight to the rook and trying to create chaos for white. This seemingly harmless move just helps white, because what did we discuss? The best way white can now win this position is to open the center with moves like f4, and that's where the problem is. Now you open your center up, and white has so many things he can do. So black, realizing his mistake, moves his bishop back, which now shows the futility of the bishop move. And now, simply put, you are going to break open the center and then cause chaos in black's position. The move c4 is an interesting move. He's simply taunting black here. Black can't take this pawn. It's in his favor. It's in white's favor. If pawn takes, rook takes, and if queen takes, knight takes, you realize that this is in his favor. So he's now clearing out the difficulties he has in his position before finally setting up his attack. We have f6 here. Queen to g6 check. Of course, he weakened the diagonal with the pawn move f6. It's a weakening of the diagonal. And white, being so skilled, noticed the weakness, the weak color complexes around his opponent's king, and decides to attack them. And yeah, this is just a simple conversion. We have f5, queen goes back, e4, which seemingly holds the position for him, but not really. We have c6, queen to a7, knight to b3. The knight is simply going to target some weaknesses here. This is a fork. It's something that he can aim for, or simply just coming into this square. It's a very good output for the knight. So we have queen to c7, knight to d4, rook to f6, knight e6 check. The rook has to sacrifice because now you're going to lose your queen. Rook takes e6, d takes e6, g6, and this is still weakening your position. Already you have so many weakened squares. You are actually provoking your opponent to play this move. Of course, if pawn takes, if pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, queen takes, you have literally opened your king up even more. Okay, so he plays g4, h4, g takes f5, g takes f5, queen to h5, threatening checkmate. So you have to move bishop to f6, queen takes f5, absolutely pinning the bishop. Your opponent might lose it the next turn. King to e7 defending, queen takes e4, rook to g8, rook to g1. The point is, the more pieces you trade, the better white's position. And this is a funny move. Rook to g3. The point is, if you take and I take back, I threaten a promotion. Not really. Queen to h7 check, king to e8, queen to g8 check, king to e7, and then queen to f7 check, and black resigns here. Simply put, you are close to win this game. You could actually take this guy, or even take the bishop and then just promote for a winning position. Either way, this position is just fine. This bishop can't hold the whole position. These two pawns are deadly, so even if you were to play something like this, these two pawns are very deadly. You can't really hold on to this pawn. Either one of these pawns are promoting. There's nothing that black can really do to stop this winning position. So yeah, a very nice game. Of course, the result was expected, but going back into the game, you realize that the passive play of white almost would have resulted in a loss for him. So yeah, I'm just looking at most of the games that happen in round one. Of course, this is just a section of them. We'll look at the girls section as well. But before that, there's one more game from the girls section. Actually, this is the only girls section video game we are showing here, and this game was from Elizabeth Cassidy. I think she's Kenyan, versus Kamoni Elsie Wambui. So actually a little bit of future sight here. Elizabeth actually earned the silver medal. She's a 1200 rated player. I think 1197 is still 1200 in most of the star books. And I think this was the final game she played before getting the silver medal. Yeah, so let's see how this game went. e4, e5, knight to c3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, knight to f6, and we have the Vienna. Shout out to Gotham Chess. I don't know if she watches him, but hey. f4, e takes f4. She accepted the gambit, and I think they should just be good for white. I did watch a bit of Gotham Chess's videos, and mostly accepting the gambit should be good for white because, again, I've said this many times, BBC, big boy center, knight to f3, b5, that's just a lost pawn. So b5, bishop takes b5, knight to b4. The knight here does nothing. There's no real threat of the knight being here. Maybe if the bishop was here without a pawn here, then you are threatening the square, the fried liver attack, but you are not doing anything here. We have castles kingside, bishop to c5 check, king h1, like that move. Obviously you could have just pushed the pawn here, but I like this move, just getting out of danger. Castles kingside, d4, and again, this is the ideal position you would want in a chess game. Assuming your opponent never made a single move, you want pawns on d4, e4, bishops on c4, f4, knights on c3, knights on f3, queen to d2 or e2, rooks in the center. That's considered the ideal setup, or the optimal setup. Of course, we don't get these kinds of setups because of our opponent's moves, but with the gambits she did here, she's gained a bit of that kind of formation. And that's, I mean, if you are learning chess, this is some of the things you should look out for here. We have bishop to d6, e5, and that was just a blunder because, okay, that was a mistake here. So that was just a blunder because you lose your one of these guys. It's a fork. You just put yourself in a forking position. Again, good on her for spotting that. e5, I've attended tournaments where people couldn't even spot these type of things. So I'm always happy to see people of this age spotting such tactics. Bishop to e5, e takes f7. E takes f6, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f4, and white is in a very comfortable position right now. White is up 3 points of material. We have rook to e8 developing. A little bit sad that you would do that. Okay, maybe you have to bring your bishop in here now, but moving this pawn is now going to a little bit subpar, and it's going to be difficult for black to do much here. This knight is going to be a goner very soon. So we have bishop to e5, trading down pieces. Of course, that's a very good thing to do. When you are up material, trade down into a winning endgame. Bishop takes e5, knight takes e5, a6, threatening the bishop, but this just helps the bishop come to a better position. Never help your opponent develop better. D6 attacking the knight, and the beautiful move here. Most beginners would say that my knight is in danger, but the beautiful move here, queen to f3. You can take my knight and I'll take your soul. Anyway, so we have g6, queen takes check, king goes back, developing the other knight. Yeah, just no respect for this knight. I mean, d takes e5, missing the whole point, knight to g5, threatening mate on h6, and there is no easy way to stop it. Actually, you could just play rook here, but of course that invites simply queen down and then check, takes, and then you are just getting yourself in some danger here. Of course, black survives a bit. It's not completely checkmate, but of course you are trading down pieces into a winning endgame. We have e takes d4, again missing the point, and then queen to h7, checkmate. So all in all, yes, there were a lot of blunders on the side of black, but again, white didn't falter. White made excellent moves to get into a very solid winning position and capitalized on it. Your ability to convert good positions to wins is the sign of a good player. Sometimes, even in this rating range, people get their opponent making a lot of mistakes, yet they aren't able to capitalize on them. But most of these kids have been able to capitalize on them and come out with a win. Some of the things that even touched me most about these games is simply the ideology. For example, in the game with Maoli, is it Maoli? No, not Maoli, Richardson. The game with Abel, the bishop to a3 idea, very good plan. Shows that he has foresight, shows that he sees potential moves, and these are signs of good chess players. So I'm showing these games because these kids are people we should look out for. We should try and follow them and see how their chess improvement goes, because they could shock us at any point in time if they do get the right amount of training. But on to a game that chess players who have very good understanding of the game would rather like to see, and also part of psychology of chess. This is a very beautiful game between Maoli Richardson and Wafa Hamed. So Maoli Richardson is a Ghanaian as white, and then I think Wafa Hamed is Egyptian or Algerian, I do not remember. And this is a very beautiful game. It just goes to show you what you shouldn't do as a stronger rated player. A little bit of foreshadowing there. In the previous games that we saw, the stronger player played a little bit slowly against opponents, which would have gotten him in trouble. And then eventually his opponent made a mistake and he capitalized on it, and then he won. But this is an example of what happens if you take your opponent too lightly, and you see why in the following move. So we have e4 by white, e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c4, another Italian. A lot of games here are Italian, only one Sicilian. Bishop to c5, knight to c3, didn't get a c3 move here. Knight to f6, castles kingside, d3, d6. A little bit of symmetry here, like everything is symmetrical here. And as to whether this is black's opening or whether black just felt like copying white, I can't tell. It's not at this point that I realized that black was being complacent. Of course, it could be. Sometimes you can beat your opponent when the position is symmetrical because you don't really know what to do. Of course, if you are the weaker rated player. So, as to whether this was black messing around with his opponent, I do not know. h3, a normal move. You don't know what to do. h3. Also, that's a very good idea of stopping the bishop from coming here. I mean, it's not really a threat at a point, but you can do this. And then h6. So the position is completely symmetrical. So the question is, where are you going to put your bishop? I mean, anywhere is fine. D2, d3. Take your pick. Of course, I would prefer d3 because if you ever trade, I get a big boy center. I've said that many times. This recap. Bishop to e3. Oh, he chose my option. Bishop to b6. a3. a3 is a very slow move, but it has a very obvious plan. If the knight ever comes here attacking the bishop, you slot it down here. That's cool. Knight to e7, very common idea, bringing your knight over to this side. And in some cases, you play knight to h7, pushing f4. Also an idea in some of these positions. Queen to d2, very nice move. Knight to g6, like we've already forecasted. rook a to d1, bishop to e6, bishop takes e6, f takes e6. So I actually like this for black. The position could be equal, but I like this for black. Reason being, the same reason I discussed this move, you get this kind of idea in your position. So I actually like this for black. And also black would have in some cases wanted to move his knight here and open the rook file, and now he can do that. Some other ideas that also happen here are knight to f4. In one of the games I play, I reviewed on this channel between FIDE Master Hasford and a friend of his. That f4 idea was very, very crucial. So yeah, it could happen now, it could happen somewhere in the future, but it's a possible idea. Okay, d4, striking in the center, e takes d4, knight takes d4, queen to e8. Now the point of queen to e8 is that you in some moment want to transfer your queen over to this square. Rook f to e1, and like I said in the previous game, you want this kind of center, rooks in the middle and your bishops at f and e. And you can see that most of these games that we've watched, that is what the players have been doing. See, that's what they've learned and that's what they're applying, and that is very good. I am not looking down on that move. But now the move that makes me doubt black is this move, knight to h4. It's a very ambitious and slow move. Very ambitious and slow move. The obvious plan here is simply queen to g6 and then queen takes g2 checkmate. That's like the most obvious plan. And the not so obvious plan is simply, let's just make a move for black here. Like let's say black is not watching and play something like let's say white is not watching rather, and play something like a4. Now we get simply e5, and if white plays the move knight to f3, we have knight takes f3 check, pawn takes, and then we have this move, and then we can slowly bring our pieces into a very nice attacking position. Like I said, this is not the most obvious position, but it has too many conditions. One, your opponent has to play that move, and your opponent has to play another move that doesn't really affect the position. So yeah, knight to h4 I do not get. You could have even played this move in this position. In this position, it's not too obvious that your opponent is planning something here. Of course, it slows down that plan, but of course you can even still come in this way with your queen and try some other kind of idea, something like this, and bring the knight in here and then open up the rook. Some kind of plan can come out of this, but yeah, that's not what we got. Of course, also here you can trade the bishops and then place your knight on this f4 square like I've spoken about earlier. Okay, so rook f to e1, knight to h4, king to h1, simply getting out of this file. Maybe planning to play this move. I don't really support king to h1. We have e5 here finally, and the knight goes to e2. Now if the knight went to f3, then it's a different case. Of course, black still has the pressure in this position. Do not count black out, but then one of black's plans does not occur here. So now we have bishop takes, queen takes, and then knight to h5, further proving my point that black is not taking this seriously as black should. Knights on the rim are dim, we know that. And what kind of aggressive plan are you going for that you need both knights here? Maybe you're trying to get a knight here, fine, but this move is very, very questionable for for black to make. And it's at this point that white begins to take the initiative. So what does white do? We have knight to d5. Of course, this is a very good square you want to take. Threatening simply knight takes c7, forking the queen and the rook. We have queen to g6, going for the, like we said, simple plan of checkmate. It doesn't work. Now white is just winning. If you saw the blunder, hooray to you. Knight to e7 check. This is why I believe that black simply underestimated his opponent and just played anyhow from the opening all the way to knight h5 and knight h4. These moves seem to prove that black was not really taking this game seriously. I wish I had other games that Wafa Hamed has played to know what he actually plays as black, to see if indeed this is how he plays, but I'm not so sure. But this is exactly what you shouldn't do as the higher rated opponent. Play against your weaker rated opponent as though you are playing against a higher rated opponent. Recently, just yesterday on my stream, I played in such a way against a 500 rated player, and I was 1700 during that game. and I lost that game, mainly because I was assuming everything my opponent was doing was wrong. Of course, he was making wrong moves, but I didn't capitalize on them the best way I should. I guess assumed he wouldn't see the good moves. In the same vein, yeah, this is what happened. And at this point in time, unless of course white blunders, then white is completely winning. King to h8, knight takes g6 check, knight takes g6, g3, rook to f6, c4, rook a to f8, rook to f1, simply defending. Of course, at this point in time, white is not even making that much of accurate moves, but white is just fine. White is just fine. Rook to f3, queen takes, rook to f6, king to g1, rook to b3, and it's at this position that Wafa Hamed resigned the game. So yeah, very interesting game. This is actually the game I wanted to show. It didn't have as much blunders. It had one big blunder, but it didn't have as much blunders as the other games did. So yeah, as a top rated player, play to the best of your ability. Don't assume your opponent doesn't know anything, and that will really help you. Now the time control for this tournament is 90 minutes plus 30 seconds increment from move 40, I think. So yeah, they did have enough time to think. So these moves are really a shock, and this was round 1, and so this really set the tournament off for us. It was really big news at the end of the day, especially for us as Ghanaians. So that has been it for the recap of the games. Of course, I'll look more at other games that I can find, and I'll bring them all to you. So thank you guys so much for watching and checking out this video. Like, subscribe if you haven't, and I've been mostly on Twitch. I've not been on YouTube, but I've been mostly on Twitch. So you can check us out, twitch.tv/pen_Mason. Link is in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a nice day. Peace.